Jiro here for Umbra Games with a review of Am Setsuna, the first game developed by Square Enix's Tokyo RPG Factory division for PlayStation 4 and PC. Played on PlayStation 4 for this review. Am Setsuna tells the story of, you guessed it, Setsuna, a sacrifice that has to be taken to the last land in order to save the world from destruction at the hands of monsters. Am Setsuna has been advertised as a spiritual successor to Chrono Trigger, a Super Nintendo RPG from the 1990s that is critically acclaimed as one of the best to grace the console. Now, just a couple of definitions before we jump in. JRPG is a Japanese role-playing game, which actually kind of blankets a lot of different things. I usually throw in the term turn-based or menu-based combat, where you choose actions like attack or magic or items during enemy encounters. Another criteria of the JRPG is generally that you guide a party of characters on some kind of journey, generally on a defined path of progression, as opposed to the more modern Western RPG that are a bit more free and often put you in the shoes of a nameless individual that you take on and shape yourself. So now let's start looking at how Chrono Trigger set itself apart from some traditions and how Am Setsuna followed. The first is the ability to see enemy avatars on the screen before you engage in menu-based battles. The traditional JRPG would use a random number generator to determine when you would be whisked away to a battle screen after random amounts of steps. Now, while Chrono Trigger wasn't the only JRPG to show avatars, all the ones that come to mind would still shift you into a battle screen after initiated, whereas Chrono Trigger and Setsuna has all participants just jump into place to start the altercation. Setsuna lets you get the drop on enemies by approaching them from behind, and you'll begin the battle with your party members all ready to take a turn. Am Setsuna features a world map that harkens back to the days of old, where walking onto a miniature landmark loads you into that particular map. The further similarity is that there are no encounters on this world map at all, allowing you to poke around and navigate as long as you want, before entering the game's dungeons, icy forests, icy mountain paths, snowy villages, and icy snowy plains. A second principle drawn from Chrono Trigger is the game's 3-member party active time battle system. For those of you that missed or ignored the 90s JRPGs, active time battle, or ATB, is slightly different than regular turn-based because in lieu of a preset action order in your party, you wait for each character's bar to fill up and then choose their action. With the visible indicator, you can really see the difference that the stat speed as well as the buffs and debuffs like haste or slow take on a character. Enemies behave similarly, but you don't get to see their bar. With Setsuna, as you click an option, attack, ability, or item though, it will halt everyone's timer progression, giving you the time you need to choose what you need to do. This type of battle actually stays pretty fast-paced and can be entertaining, but it's not without its problems. I would wager probably somewhere around 50% of my battles during the 18-hour campaign were completed without the enemy even allowed a hit. And this wasn't using any crazy combos that I'll explain here in a minute. The key with Setsuna comes from letting your ATB bar fill up, and then it starts filling up the sphere next to it. Every time the sphere fills, it adds an SP, which I'm not really sure what it stands for, maybe Setsuna points, who knows. Anyway, up to a maximum of 3. Then, with a time button press once an action is initiated, you can activate its extra effect, called Momentum. Super Mario RPG did this, and also the Paper Mario series. For attacks, it's generally bonus damage. For something like your main character enters healing move called Aura, it doubles as a status effect removal. So, as I mentioned, when you get the jump on enemies from behind, not only is the ATB bar full, but you have 1 SP to go with it, allowing you to use momentum right off the bat. It was often with 1 round of abilities using this that most enemies would die on sight. I don't think I had any kind of challenge until a boss about 8 hours in forced me to develop an overarching boss tactic with which I never failed again. One of my favorite concepts from Chrono Trigger was the ability to do combo moves. In Setsuna, you equip items called Sprit Knight into slots of which the number increases as you level, kind of functioning like Final Fantasy VII's materia system. These Sprit Knight are what provide each character their abilities. Command Sprit Knight are unique to a character, with Ender getting things like Cyclone and Aura, Setsuna getting Cure and Lightning, Kier getting Fire and Bio, etc. If you have a party of 3 with their compatible Sprit Knight equipped, you can engage in combo moves, including both duo and trio. In Chrono Trigger, these were devastating. In Setsuna, I really only used 1 or 2. This feels like an example of the developers understanding what is going on, but not why, or at least not why it's satisfying to the player. Combo moves in Chrono Trigger were learned as a result of characters being together in a party for a while. You felt like the characters got to understand each other's fighting styles and abilities and would use those cooperatively. Now, half the time in Setsuna, when you look at a character's available combos, you can only see whether they're duo or trios by the little 2 or 3 people next to it, and what they are called. Now, some of these are intuitive, like insert element here, cleave, was obviously Ender's cleave with whatever character had the element, but the majority were far less so, leaving you to equip random abilities or random combinations of characters to figure it out. Even Chrono Cross, Trigger's true sequel, lost the uniqueness of this by having the 42 playable characters with combos based on the character's base element. There are a few themes that Setsuna shares with Chrono Trigger from a content perspective, which I'll withhold for spoiler reasons, but Setsuna is a little more ripe with tragedy, with a story closer to that, honestly, of Final Fantasy X while we're drawing comparisons. While none of the characters in Setsuna were annoying or irritating though, most were just kind of forgettable, especially paired with unpronounceable names. I often couldn't remember who was whom. It does give you the option to rename them as you meet them, but it was always my rule back in the day to play through the first time without changing names. Huh, I just realized you can change Setsuna's name, which means the title I Am Setsuna could be meaningless in a playthrough. I mean, I guess people would argue that Chrono Trigger was the same way because Chrono's the main character, but technically his name was C-R-O-N-O and the game was C-H-R-O-N-O, a prefix for time, so no, it wouldn't. You're often allowed to pipe in as Ender in cutscenes, but your choices really don't seem to have an effect in the grand scheme of things, or honestly even the small scheme of things. It was usually just the next text box following what you said that would guide your selfish or generous answer back to the same path for the rest of the program conversation. Character motivations and reactions didn't always really seem believable, as, for example, in the very beginning as Ender, you're from a tribe of mercenaries and you're sent to kill Setsuna. And with Blade out, you get forced into changing your mind as she instantly wants you to become her bodyguard and protect her because she trusts you. Setsuna takes a unique approach to gaining character abilities, as the aforementioned Sprit Knight is obtained by selling enemy drops for money to the Magic Consortium. Different combination of drops make different Sprit Knight available to you free of charge. An enemy can drop up to 8 different items depending on how they're killed, which is another rarely employed mechanic. Killing with a specific element, as well as overkill, exact kill, debuff kill, or linked kill, will open up the list in the bestiary in case you need to farm for specific items. Once you clear an area for the first time, or sometimes even before then, black and white tougher versions of fiends can sometimes appear that offer different drops for the challenge. The enemy types were pretty limited though, with a lot of palette swaps. In addition to gathering materials for Sprit Knight, there are also cooking recipes that can be gained by talking to specific NPCs while having specific materials in your inventory, claimed from these little sparkles across the area maps and world maps. Food can be consumed before an encounter for a buff that only lasts through the next battle. I think I found 3 total recipes, but with limited choices, expensive price, and such a minimal duration, I didn't see the value in food consumption. Equipment is limited to a weapon and a talisman. Talismans are accessories that offer small immediate bonuses, but more importantly provide enhancements to abilities through the Flux system. Now, there's a pretty confusing shroud around the Flux, and even now that I'm done with the game, I'm not sure I completely understand. When using momentum during battle, sometimes a random thing occurs called a singularity. The singularity will cause status effects, or not let your party's HP reduce below 1 for a short period of time, or something of that nature. Now, I'm not sure at this point if it's just random, but sometimes that singularity will cause a flux to activate, giving your party members Sprit Knight enhancements based on whatever talisman they have equipped. This is another example of a mechanic that would have been fun to work with, but it felt like implementation for the sake of another feature, just kind of lacking the heart and soul. Normally, one of the exciting things in JRPGs is discovering new and memorable areas, villages, and NPCs. But the world of I Am Setsuna is all covered in snow and ice, making most locales simply blend together in memory. All of the dungeon areas that were ruins are palette swapped as well, not really letting any of them stand out in the blur. Early areas felt really small, and I worried at first the entire game was going to keep that trend. I mean, we're talking 4 or 5 enemy encounters on one screen map between cutscenes. A good mechanic for games like this is to have your resource management tested, forcing you to balance MP and ability usage while delving down into dungeons, and this was a piece Setsuna was missing. Every time a character reaches a new level, their HP and MP are refilled. Ender's Aura heals the party, Setsuna's Cure 2 heals the party, and Nitter's Blunt Blow ability does damage to the foe and heals the party. There are potions, there are tents and cabins to be used as save points, and there just really weren't a whole lot of times where the party was challenged. Keeping Setsuna out of battle and healing with her as needed remained a sustainable option, as she leveled from the small percentage of experience points she received while sitting out, keeping her MP topped off. The game's soundtrack is composed almost entirely by some really great piano pieces, and it may be the most diverse aesthetic of the entire game. It's a decent one to add to the official soundtrack collection. So I have to put this out there, and I in no way mean to belittle the indie game community at all. I Am Setsuna was made with Unity. I can see it and I can feel it. I've dabbled with Unity, and it's a great tool to help small developers get their game out there. This is a AAA publisher charging $40 for a digital-only release of an 18-hour RPG made in Unity. Well, it just doesn't feel quite right, especially when put next to titles half the cost like Child of Light. I did poke around through some walkthroughs online for Setsuna when I was done to see if I missed any side quests or possibilities of alternate endings compared to Chrono Trigger's 12, accessed by New Game Plus, but it looks like there are none. And apparently, taking each party member to a specific NPC after a specific event will allow you to obtain their ultimate ability, after which a new boss will appear in one of the game's ancient ruin areas. And there's one hidden area that was funny to see, but didn't really add much, if anything at all. I mean, of course, this is all up to an individual's value assessment of a purchase. I mean, knowing what I do now about the game, I would still purchase it again, but not just because it was a remotely interesting stroll down memory lane, but also to hopefully show Square Enix that there is a place for traditional yet modernized JRPGs. Just hope we can encourage them next time to aim for something a bit higher in scope, like Mistwalker's Blue Dragon or Lost Odyssey, released on Xbox 360, and not something that comes to the current generation consoles and PCs that honestly kind of feels like it could have been released on Nintendo 3DS. When you advertise that you're a spiritual successor to Chrono Trigger on your marketing though, you better be prepared to back up your claim. And unfortunately, I don't think I Am Setsuna fills those shoes in a quality manner. Rated as a menu-based RPG, it has enough ups for its downs and hits the average mark of a 51 out of 100. This is Jiro for Umbra Games. Thanks for watching. Whether it be old school or a spiritual successor, you can probably find it here on my channel, or I'll get to it eventually. Feel free to subscribe for updates or follow me on Twitter @Umbra Games.